Welcome back, everybody. This is Jason Seacrest, and we are going to go through a nice question and answer session. This was all about values, and I've been getting that question a lot. So we're going to come through in a couple different waves just to show you some different tips and some different ways that you can be applying values. So today is all about highlights, and I have quite a few different things that we could do that I think are pretty manageable and pretty flexible for your workflow. So let's just kind of go through them. We are only going to be working with the highlights today, but you can kind of see that he's already starting to round out, and each little part has a little bit of a different process. So this is just what do you like, what makes sense to you, and we'll give you some approaches. So first things first, let me just kind of make sure you guys know what you're looking at. If I zoom up at the top, I have already created kind of a sticker look at the background. I have colored using Live Paint Bucket. That's pretty standard on most of the tutorials. And I'm going to be dealing in a duplicate layer right above it. So the main key thing I want to just point out is this flat color layer. Since a lot of this stuff is going to become transparent or see-through, or we're going to add on some sort of layer style to it, it's going to bleed through to whatever this base is. So that's one key concept. The second key concept is that if I turn off these strokes, just notice that all of the colors, they're already kind of cut out, and you could do that with a couple different things. The Live Paint Bucket will automatically do it, so that is why it is my kind of coloring of choice. But if you just grab all of your color layer as well as your strokes at a certain point, especially with Pathfinder, there is this nice little merge, and it will almost do the exact same kind of cutout. So if you guys have never played with that merge before, it'll give a very similar approach once you guys are all expanded with all your stuff. So that is going to be a pretty key concept, since a lot of the things are going to be bouncing off of these edges. I just wanted you to be aware of what those edges actually look like. So that is going to be where we're going to start. So I'm on my highlight layer. Notice that everything else would be locked out. And let's just do some easy ones first. These, I've got all sorts of different ones, so you just can see how it would play out. These are all feathers, so this is just me drawing out a random shape with the pen tool. If I come into my appearance panel, just notice that I have a fill. This would be a little bit lighter since it's a highlight than whatever this base color is. But if I just click on feather, but you can just do some real subtle little things with it, and it'll just blend out that outside. So it'll read a little bit nicer as a highlight. So again, just go one or two up. You can also play around with the transparency. This one is just no transparency. I've not done anything with the layer style or the blending mode, but that would be something to kind of play around with as well. Now the next two, just so you can see, is I'm still adding on a feather. I have just an expanded stroke up at the top here. So let me just zoom in. So that's just me doing an expanded one. And you'll see this pretty frequently, this type of a look. The one I'm going to prefer a little bit more, that I think reads a little bit nicer, and it's just really user-friendly, is the unexpanded. So notice that these are all strokes. I have a nice little width profile on them, and then all of those also have a nice little feather on it. So what I really, really like about this one is you can come in and say, hey, I want to control that stroke. And it's still live, and it really just applies right to it. And then I don't have to do this weird guessing and checking with that feather. Sometimes it's a little bit finicky. You just got to keep on clicking up and down, and then that would be kind of how that would play out. So the one that I think you guys are going to really like is this feather with a live stroke, and that is on a width profile. Now I will point out that just so you can kind of see what's happening in this tie here is I have multiple offset paths. So I have a dark, that's an offset path that has a feather. So you might be able to see this coming out. That's a feather. And then I have an offset path off of that one. So that's multiple offset paths. The only thing I did with these little strokes here is I did the offset path. I changed it to stroke only. And then I just came in with my scissor tool. And then I was able to just kind of snip with the way I want. But you can kind of see how this is flowing the same way as all of that outside stuff. So if I have my offset path, notice that these are all feathers. So all that's going to be is a flat fill, and then it's just blending out that outside. So with the offset path in that tie. And if I zoom out, that's reading pretty nicely. Now, why I like feathers, why I like those effects, and why I like live paint is you might be able to see that it's all bouncing off of the shape that we had. Let's just zoom in so you guys can kind of see how that would play out. So this outside layer, that is going to be darker. I did an offset path for those that don't know how to get there. Path. I am going to do an offset path. I would preview, and the major one is just notice how this one's going on the outside. I want that to go on the inside. So I want it to be a negative, and let's just do 0.5. I want that to be round. And then you can kind of start playing and guessing and checking. So you can say, well, that seems a little bit too big. I can click on tab and or just click off of it. And you can kind of see that there's my original. Then it's coming in. And then I can click, I clicked on OK, so that's how I got mine. So that's that shape. And then notice it's a little bit lighter, and then I blended it out. So this is a little bit lighter. So notice that it's getting a little bit lighter in here, but I'm keeping that dark. And if I do a little bit more on the dark, let's just do this. Just so you guys can see it. You're going to say, I don't believe them. But that's getting a little bit darker. But just notice that it's not blending out all the way at this edge. It's blending out from that offset path, and then it's blending out. So you have a little bit of control with it. It's just one little extra step, but I like that it's not necessarily going directly from the outside. So let's go Control 0. That one's kind of fun. Just play around with it. It's just offset paths. I'm just going to grab the shape, and then just notice that I did an inner glow. So the inner glow, very, very similar process, but it's just going to go from those outside edges. It's going to bounce in. So if I preview, I can play around with how much that highlight is coming in. So this one's really user-friendly. Again, it is bouncing from that outside line. So I am a big, big believer in having all of these cut in, because then all of these effects start playing off of it, which is going to read pretty close to more than likely what you're going to be looking for. That one's a really, really flexible one. I do like that one quite a bit. So that one, again, is just inner glow. So if I come over here, again, all of this can be done in your appearance panel. And even if you come up to the top and do effect, you can edit all of that after the fact. So for those of you that are like, what's expand appearance? There's your appearance. So this is the culprit. You have to expand what's in this menu, and that's why it says that. So in the inner glow, just notice that it's in center, and then it's a lighter color. So this one is usually this one right here, this setting, the screen 75%, that's default. And then all you have to do is go how in or out I want it. And then usually you have to click on like the inside. Now, if I'm doing shadows, then I would do the edge. So very, very similar to what we just did down here. You're going to kind of see a little bit of an overlapping. And then I would just bounce to the edge. But since we're not doing shadows today, that is what we're going to be doing. And the last and final one. We went through all sorts of different stuff today. If I click on this one, you're going to kind of just notice that there's the nice little gradient. If I come on over to our gradient panel, there is in CC the freeform gradient. So if I click on our nice little gradient tool, you're going to see all of our little swatches. And then I can come in and then I can control where each one of those is. And then I could also say what color is each one. So if I want things to be a little bit darker, I could do that, and then you can kind of go from there. So you can control it. This is kind of like their version of the mesh tool, since probably there was enough complaints about the mesh tool that they did this, but it's a great, great alternative. So this one is a great one if you want a little bit more of a smooth gradient, but it just has a little bit more on where you want it to go. So it's a little bit more specific on highlights, shadows, and then you can add as many of these bad boys as you want to read into your character. So just be aware of that. You can also keep on adding. So I might say do one for just shadows and then come back and do one for just highlights. And that could be another little option for you. But I think many of you, if I'm just looking at that bow tie, I think that's pretty spot on. And that's pretty easy to do. So that's just a dark background. I did a little offset path. I added a lighter color, and then I added a feather to it. And then this one is another offset path with another little feather to it. So this one we will add into we'll probably just do this guy, but just so you guys can see it. that'll kind of give you guys some different little options. But again, just play around with your layers and then play around with inner glows. I think that one's going to do you justice. Play around with feather. And then I would also play around with your offset paths. Just remember that little negative, and then that'll bring it to the inside rather than the outside. So let's say this white sticker, that is a positive, and so it's going out from the line rather than in. So other than that, I think that will cover the highlights. I am going to come back through and do one for the shadows, but we will kind of go through and just give you some different little options. And again, thank you for those of you that have been saying, hey, I need some more help with values, and we're going to kind of go through it. So just play around with it, have some fun, and I will see you guys on the next tutorial.